Hey, Kirk, quick question before we get rolling. If you hit the lotto tomorrow, would you still be doing this auction stuff?
If I won $100 million, I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing right now.
Do you think you could have time to maybe meet me at the gate?
I'm Rich Levene, and this is Meet Me at the Gate, where we're not just talking theory, we're tackling real-world problems head-on, driving solutions that supercharge productivity and team dynamics. Every episode is a journey towards improvement, empowering you, the manager, to lead with innovation and confidence. Join us to transform everyday roadblocks into highways for success. When you think about growing your auction, what comes to mind? More cars, better buyers? The truth is, growth starts with preparation. In this opening segment, Ty breaks down how independent auctions can start planting the seeds today to win tomorrow, especially when it comes to landing commercial accounts.
When I talk to transport guys, I say, who's your customer? Well, the car dealer. Okay, yeah, but the auction is too. And also within the auction, there's two columns that I always talk about, the auction sales rep and the commercial accounts rep. Those two can become a customer of yours as well if you understand that side of the business. And so then that starts that dialogue into repos and all kinds of different things. But
yeah, maybe we can meet up at an auction sometime too and walk through some processes. Or
I forgot to tell you this, Rich, but I think I've got the new manager, Rachel, talked into going to an auction academy.
Sweet.
The owner is, his dad started JB Hunt.
Oh, wow.
So he's there every Tuesday. I ran into him Friday and I said, hey, have you heard of Auction Academy? No. I'm like, oh, wow. Well, you want commercial accounts, don't you? Yeah. See, this is crazy. I got this from Trevor over there in Wichita. You know Trevor, don't you?
Yeah. Yep, Trevor.
Yeah. Trevor did it right. He went to Auction Academy. 2 years later, guess what he has at his auction? Commercial accounts. And so I'm trying to prep them and teach them. And that's why I asked that question. Okay, you don't have the commercial accounts yet. You want them. Let's get prepared for that. And so I think there's some opportunity there, Kurt.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity out there that it's I've had people tell me, they're like, Kirk, you're going to run out of work. And I'm like, there's no way.
No.
In maybe 1,000 years, not in my lifetime, right? There's so much fun stuff to work on. And that's what I love is like finding guys like you that are innovative. I mean, you're out here doing the entrepreneurial thing. You're pulling ideas together. I mean, it's connecting people to solve problems. That's what it's all about. And then it's about the service of other people. It doesn't matter what job you're doing. Right? The one thing I talk about all the time is the most important person at an entire auction is the person stocking in a car. But the next most important person, which is equal to that person, is the person CRing the car. And the next person is the person signing off the car, doing the cert. Every role at the auction is part of that workflow and is the most important job that all adds up to that final thing where it crosses the block. Even the person that's running the Zamboni around that's cleaning the floor, you never know who's going to walk that floor. And you want it to be pristine and perfect and right? So I'm a big believer. Every single person deserves respect, deserves to be served, right? And if you create an environment like that, that's what it's all about.
Bam.
That's a win.
Bam.
Bam.
So I'm the guy that was doing the independent entrepreneur thing too, and then E-Block hired me as a consultant. So I was helping them with operational efficiency. That's when they said, "Hey, do you know anybody who wants to be a GM?" So now you know where the story is. So they end up hiring me. I don't think my operational experience is near as good as yours, and some of the tools you have. Listening to you talk, we can go out and make auctions great again.
That was another thing. I was joking when I started at the company. I took my first trip to an independent auction and I sent out a text message to like a bunch of my friends. And I was like, I'm going to make auctions great again. Actually, I could show you the text message. And then you guys took it. I was like, these guys are awesome. I was like, whatever idea I have, I just need to go check the Ty and Rich Levene show, and they've probably already done it. So you guys are like 2 steps ahead of anything I'm thinking. So it's
no, we got you. We got you, man. We're here to make auctions great again.
Heck yeah.
That's right. I love it.
And Ty and I are definitely here to help other people too. Right? Whatever we can do to help people. People watch this podcast, they go to your website.
It's auctionexcellence.com.
All right. And if they can't find it because they got fat fingers they can't spell, they can call you at what number?
678-662-2274.
Bam. Let's rewind for a second. Kirk's not just another name in the industry. He's someone who's lived the auction transformation from the inside out. In this next clip, you'll hear how he found his purpose and what he's learned from big wins and hard lessons, and how auction excellence was born. All right, Kirk. So give us the lowdown. What are you passionate about?
What I'm most passionate about is the frontline employee at the auction. 20 years ago, was working at an auction. What I recognized is that frontline employee, or really the ops manager, it's always their fault. My cars are not on spot, but they're the ones working in the snow. They're working the weekend. And so my passion is, honestly, I love auctions. Kind of a joke with a lot of my personal friends. They joke all the time that if I won $100 million, I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing right now. Like, I wouldn't change it. I'd probably do it for free because I just love auctions and I love the people at auctions. Honestly, it's the frontline employee, right? I've seen the stress and what they go through. And my job is, how do I make it easier for them? If they're working the weekends, how do I get it where they don't have to work the weekends? If they're staying late, what are the stress points in the system? And my job is to help alleviate those stress points and make their job easier. So that's what I get passionate about. I love it, done it my entire life. And that's why I'm here. I've been either in a support role or a lead role, leading an operational excellence team for the past 20 years focused on auctions. With this company, what I've really hoped to do is take all the failures that I've had over the years, as well as the successes, and how do I pull them together into the core things that will make the biggest impact at auctions today.
Let's talk about one of those failures. What's the biggest failure tied to the biggest lesson? So it doesn't have to be the biggest failure. Tell us about a failure you had and what you did and how you learned from it and how you got better.
There was a very large project that we were working on with a huge client. I mean, this was going to be multi-$100 million type deal that we were working on. And we came up with a layout design, a huge capital infrastructure project type thing that we put in play with the hope that this client and this thing was going to pay off in the long run. And so got it sold, got it put in, and the timing was just off. And it ended up that the client decided that they didn't want to go in. So basically a lot of the CapEx costs and structure and stuff that we put in to this facility was, I don't want to say wasted. It's always can be repurposed and utilized in different ways. But some of the due diligence, we were looking at it from assuming that the client was going to be there and from an operational standpoint. And some of the due diligence up front of what we probably should have done to really look at sizing the opportunity and stepping into it a little bit. One of the lessons I've always learned is a lot of people, what I found is they jump to the expensive solution, or they jump to the heavy tech solution or the heavy CapEx solution first. And what I've learned over the years is, how do you incrementally build opportunity costs and smaller improvements along the way? Ideally, every improvement we make should be almost no cost at all and get as big of impact. And then as you start looking at areas where you do need to invest into the business, then you've got a better opportunity cost. And sometimes you may not even need that investment because you've made enough improvements along the way that you don't have to invest into it. So that's one of the CapEx, but I've dealt with the same thing on large scale, like technology type initiatives as well, where we've overinvested in tech projects or things that maybe didn't pan out 100%. And we should have started in a more incremental way.
What your clientele that you target, is that independent auctions, smaller auctions? You're not going after the big conglomerates, as Ty and I call them.
I've spent 20 years, serving and kind of giving my life to the big M. And so
you've been listening to our podcast.
Yeah.
We got the big M, the big M, the big A, and the triple A.
And so, I mean, I'm not, I love serving people. So like to me, and one of coming out of the big M, one of my big takeaways is I was a little bit nervous going into some independence. I'm like, is it going to be totally different? And what I learned is an auto auction is an auto auction. It's all the same. Technology may be a little bit different, but an auction's an auction, and the frontline employee is the frontline employee. And so that's what's really got me excited is, it's opened up a large pool of, there's so many great people on the independent side that can serve and get into. But that's kind of my main focus right now is there's several independent locations that I'm starting to work with.
Awesome. Cool. So when you walk into an independent facility, I mean, obviously there's some differences between but now I'm on the small independent side. I was with the big conglomerate forever, and it felt like a breath of fresh air because I found myself picking up the phone, calling the boss, hey, I want to do this. Like, it's your auction, go do it. Hey, it's your auction, go do it. So what's your experience been like going and working, spending all those years with the conglomerate and now walking to the independents?
One thing I've seen with the larger companies is there's a lot of approvals that you've got to go through. To some degree, a lot of like red tape and certain things that you've got to kind of work through. And one thing I found is very refreshing is that talk to the owner, talk to the general manager, lay out options. We don't need 50,000 pretty PowerPoint presentations. We make logical, math-based business decisions, and we make it roll. One of the recent independents I was at, we came to a design on the property, showed how it was going to work, showed the math behind it, but we had to cut a hole in a fence in this, and we just made it happen. We just right there, cut the hole, opened it up, and we started rocking and rolling like within 30 minutes. Right. So, I mean, it's the type of thing that I love the kind of fluidity, I guess, and how fast decisions can be made with the independents and the passion too. Like the other piece too, that I see as a big difference is that I'm a big believer that every car counts, and we should treat that car as if that car is going to my daughter or my grandmother or something like that. And we treat it with care, and we, no matter how beat up it is, we polish it up and take care of it. But that car means so much to that independent, because at the end of the day, it's in their pocketbook, right? And so the expenses and every component matters. So that's one thing I, want to definitely take care of, is walk in is understanding this is their money. Every expense that they're spending, you want to use it wisely and give the best return for the dollars that they're spending.
Now we get into the real world stuff, the messy middle, silos, communication, breakdowns, and how leadership shows up when things fall apart. Ty brings a meet me at the gate mindset, and we talk about how to break through the chaos and align with the flow.
I just met Kirk, but I like the way Kirk talks. He uses the word flow, workflow. This is how we came up with this podcast, Meet Me at the Gate. I've always said for years, if you're a manager and you got a problem, the best place to go find the problem is go stay at the gate for an entire week. And you'll start to see where the breakdowns are. That's just my opinion. I've never worked in an auction. I'm just a vendor guy who's moved a lot of cars for auctions. When I'm just standing here looking at it and I see 75 cars trying to get checked in, and I see 75 cars trying to get checked out, to me, there's a problem. And so as a transport guy, transport company, transport owner of multiple trucks, I called it workarounds. I would always each auction, you would have to have a workaround, because you're right, Kurt, you said it. They're all the same. An auction's an auction. But once you get there, there's just different, how do you navigate? How do you get the gate pass? Yep. Where is the sold lot? And then, so one of my big things is time. I don't want my drivers to go into that auction and try to find 9 cars and pull them out. I don't want that. I just want my driver to pull in. There are the cars. There are the keys. You got an hour to load. Go. So we pay, this is crazy. We pay somebody, we call him a car puller. I got Connie the car puller up in Kansas City. I pay Connie the car puller $10 to $15 a car, just so my driver does not have to go into your auction. Now, it sounds like I'm being mean and cranky. I'm not. I'm just saying that's the way we have to do our business, because time matters. We're on that truck. As soon as that truck starts rolling, you only have so much time before you got to stop. So I like the meet me at the gate approach. It kind of sounds like what you're talking about. But if you can get it to where the sold cars are here, the transport parking lot's here, bang, bang, bang,
Yep. Well, that's so sort of the approach, like the high level. There's like a psychological philosophy of working with people. Like my kind of framework is behavior or people, process, and then technology. So we kind of talked about the behavioral side or the team insight side. As we go in, we look at the ops manager, but they're just one piece of the whole puzzle. We got to kind of connect all the dots and understand how they're communicating, how they're working. Then the next piece is the process optimization. So where I always start is I take the current state layout, and what happens at auctions is that there's variability that hits an auction. So that variability could be how many cars are arriving per day. And one thing that I've learned is that transporters are actually on pretty standard patterns. And so an age-old thing that we've always tried to do is we need better data outside of the gate to know what's coming so we can better plan. What I found is just by using historical data, we can develop very tight prediction models of what's actually hitting the property because these transporters are actually on predictable numbers. So in process optimization, a part of that is understanding the variability on a per hour basis that's hitting the auction. And so then what I look at is then I take the entire capacity of the lot. And what happens, we may get hit with a bunch of cars. We don't know where to put them. And so then an auction puts them over here. Well, then something was over there. And then they've got to take what was over there and put it over here. And the next thing you know, the entire lot, we're using the lot to handle the variability. The approach should be that there's one single flow of how it works 24/7, 365. And so what I do with sites is we develop an SOP for at the gate, how the gate should always operate. Step one, step two, how does our shops operate? How does inventory operate? How does sale day operate? How does our sold lot? And each of these areas have an input, have a process, and have an output. And once we get it operating with a certain way where we align the labor to each of those areas, right, it takes out all the variability and we can plan for it. And then that's how the lot should always work, right? So that it's predictable. So, as a transporter, like, oh, the sold lot's here. And then tomorrow they moved it. Why did they move it? It's not the auction's trying to do this to trick you up. It's because, they got behind. They had to move the stuff somewhere. And so that's what we're trying to do basically is take out all the variability in the system and make it very predictable, right? And then lastly, how you harden it all down is through technology. So the last kind of piece is that once you get the people, you get the process lined up, the last component is how do you make the system real time where you're looking at metrics in each area to ensure that the system doesn't go backwards. So there's going to be points where variability does hit the site. We got hit with 30 cars at once. We weren't planning. Well, how do we adjust labor in real time? Like if we're waiting till the next day, it's too late. Those cars have already moved and it's already created chaos in the system, right? So the goal is that we want to create a system that no matter the variability that hits the auction, we can plan for any scenario that hits us. And that's an auction that's got there's got that flexibility that's built in.
So this kind of slides into, you mentioned people, right?
Yep.
You said it's always the people, the boots on the ground, the people touching it. You said something about that earlier, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So as a vendor, I look at one of my big ideas I've had for a long time because I understand there needs to be security measures. You can't just walk in, grab a car and leave. I get it.
Yep.
But one of my big ideas was always, you've heard of auction access?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Transport access. So the transport guy can come to the auction, flash his bag. He's in the auction database, whatever that is.
Yep.
And we know who he is. We know where he lives. We know what he has, truck, trailer, everything about the guy. Now here's your gate pass. And that's even changing too, right? The technology on how we use gate passes, how we get gate passes.
Yep.
That's changing as well. So they're doing supposedly, well, I've actually done it in real life. You can have the gate pass on your phone and they can scan it. You don't even have to have paper.
Excellent.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I think that's a great example, what we were just walking through about there's the behavioral side of how people, transporters come into an auction. There's a process of how you're deploying other people to come in, or you may be coming in and working through certain things. And then there's better technology, right? From the auction perspective, right, they're going to look at it and say, I don't want a bunch of people, random people that I don't know potentially on my lot, right? Because there's theft and there's security issues and all sorts of stuff that happens, right, all the time. And so that's where I look at it. And one of the first things I look at is safety, right? We should always safety, quality, delivery, cost, and then the engagement of the employees. Those are 5 kind of core principles. But from a safety standpoint, is everybody wearing a safety vest on the property? Can I identify who's a transporter, who's a dealer, and who's the employee actually physically working at the auction? And a lot of times that's not consistent. And so that's just something that you don't need technology. That's just a basic behavioral, cultural process change that enables you to identify who's who on the property and make sure you're asking the right questions to certain people. But I love the idea. Like, I think that's a great idea that then as you advance into the technology piece that costs money and whatnot, how do we better vet, employees and tie things into our gate pass systems and things of that nature. So it's a great idea.
We've talked leadership. We've talked people. Now let's talk precision. This final segment takes us inside Kirk's system for reducing chaos, tightening processes, and building scalable, predictable auction flow that customers and commercial accounts can count on. When you go to an auction, if you don't have your driver's license and you don't have a paper gate pass, by God, we're not going to let you take your car. So it's like, the technology's there. We've just got to find a way to get it where it's readily available.
Yep, absolutely. That's where I think, one thing, working on very large scale technology projects and helping in some of the prioritization of those projects, it comes down to like an ROI on certain things. That's where a lot of these companies are looking at it, and there's so many different problems to solve. And so that a lot of times it just comes down to where's the investment in getting the systems where they need to be and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's a huge advantage if a technology like that existed, right? But a lot of times it's quantifying. I think that's the kind of stuff that we can do, right? Like Rich, like you and I could probably go into an auction and help quantify that better, tell that story. And then there's probably people out there that could design the technology that could be like, I never even thought about working with like auction access. Like that would be a great tie-in that they'd probably be super interested in.
Just let's go down that rabbit hole for a second, because you mentioned ROI. So let's say you and I and Ty, we're going to go together and we're going to pitch an auction. We're going to put in this facial recognition technology to get your car out. First line of defense is they're going to say it's too expensive. Okay, so let's look at Major League Baseball example, or Jamaica. When you go to another country and you're going through immigration, what's the number one complaint of every vacationer when they're going through the immigration line? The length of time, right? How long does it take me to get through there? It's the amount of time, because everybody wants to tailgate and they all want to go at the same time. It's time. When you get to the auction and you need to get your car out, Ty, what's the biggest complaint?
Time.
Exactly. So the problem we're solving is time. So let's look at the ROI on this one and say, okay, now Ty, if I'm able to get you in and out of the auction, get your truck loaded, you got a 7-car, 9-car, 3-car, whatever. Let's say I can get a car on your truck every 5 minutes and get you down the road. You'd now be able to make more money. You'd save gas because your truck's not running. Your time clock wouldn't be running. Yes, see right there. There's the ROI. What happened? Okay, now Ty, what are you going to do when the little auction in Houston has this technology? What are you going to tell your dealer buddies?
This is the auction to go to, and I'm glad you brought it up, because this has always been my. So you hear me gripe or you hear me complain, but where that's really coming from is I have a customer that's also your customer. I want to serve my customer so my customer's happy. If my customer is happy, he bought his cars today. He got them just a little bit ago. No joke. Guess where he's going to go again next week? Same place. Yeah. And it becomes a routine. I can go in, I can buy the cars, I can have, arbitration, whatever you want to do. There's little problems. But once a dealer figures out I can go buy cars and get them next day, no hassle, unreal. And I've done it for 25 years now, and it's a true story. It really is. Yeah. You build a lane, you build a relationship with the auction, with the gate, with the check-in, with all commercial accounts, auction sales reps. All those are my favorite people, and I love them. And once you get that relationship established, guess who's always happy to come back? Rich just said it, the dealer.
Well, I think a common theme here is like silos versus workflows, right? So you go into an auction and you look at the workflow of an auction and the different departments, and what happens a lot of times is silos get created, right? And so the goal is you break down the silos and things start flowing. We'll take it up a level, right? There's a workflow from the transporter to the auction, and then the auction's a black box, and then coming out of the auction, the transporter's got to take it to where it needs to go, which is the dealership, right? Well, there's a higher level workflow, but then there's silos that are created between transporters, the auction, the dealership, right? That if you could streamline that entire, and a lot of the remarketing clients, a lot of these commercial clients, everything that they talk about all the time are driving, sending cars into, big sellers like a CarMax or something like that, it's all about cycle time. And so measuring that high level workflow, like you get the right industry partners together looking at that to start solving it. Like sometimes the cost, it may be like putting that technology in, maybe just an expense to the auction, but it's a benefit to somebody else within the industry. So that's where I think like things like NAAA or what Dave Blake's doing with IAG is so important, to start taking those conversations up a level and looking at where are the silos in the industry that we can break down and take days out of the system. Like the way I look at it is that there's 15, 20 million vehicles every year that are sitting out on the sidelines, and there's 400 auto auctions, right? We got to get cars to, we got to get cars away from. And what these consigners are looking at is which auction can I send it into that's going to have the fastest speed, right? And the ones that have the fastest speed have less silos or operating in a more flow manner, right? And that's where, like, once you take it up to that perspective, there's so much benefit, right? I mean, the end, I think you hit on this on I was listening to one of your calls, Rich, is that our end customer is that client, that the seller and the buyer. How do we make life for them easier? And if we can make it easier for the transporter and the different people in the process, everybody wins, right?
Yeah. So that's what you do. You're helping make the process at the auction easier to get the cycle times from before and after. So you're helping the middle of the sandwich. You're the Oreo cookie. You're the middle. You're the frosting. You're the best part. And you're at the auction. So you told me, you and I had some conversations. You said you have some software, some technology that you have proprietary to you that you use when you go in to assess an auction, right? To say, hey, you can take, if you move this operation or this process to, this spot, kind of take it from there. You've got a way to quickly get that rolling, right? Tell us about that.
And this is sort of a process piece that, like, I think is going to be the next standard. Like, one of my slogans, like if you look at my website or whatever, I'm a big believer in, is continuous improvement. And continuous improvement is always about setting the standard, right? So like, I don't believe in operations meetings. I believe in set the standard meetings, because whatever standard you create, you want to make something better. In the old days, the goal was like, we have to have all vehicles CR'd in a day, like get it under a day, and then sign off in a day, estimates in a day. But as you're doing that and you're thinking about the backlog at each one of those steps, that's physical capacity on the property that you're creating variability at each step, that's blowing up, that's creating the lot, that's limits the amount of cars that can take in. So I've worked with sites that we're producing triple the volume on a third of the space that other locations are producing because of the speed. So I think one of the new standards, like I've developed a process where we can check in a car, we can CR it, we can sign it off, we can certify it, and we can do the estimates on that car in under 5 hours. So you think about the speed of the flow coming through the property and then moving through. So to do that, to your questions, there's a little bit of roundabout to get to your question. To do that, it just doesn't happen, right? There has to be a plan, an organized plan with math, right? We have to look at math, look at prediction models, that kind of stuff. So what I've done is, one is I've got software and things I can work with that look at the layout design of the property to know how much physical capacity. So like one site I was working with, they had 800 parking spaces designated for the sign-off process. And we're able to get that down to 50 parking spaces. So it wasn't by like stacking the cars on top of each other. It was by creating better flow through that area. So what we gained was 750 more parking spaces somewhere else. So what I look at is, as we're modeling it, I've got different models that will help us look at the flow of the cars as they go through, but it impacts the capacity of the vehicles around the property. And then I'm a big believer in that. A lot of times people look at a property and they're always negative about, oh, our property is limited and they should have redesigned this or done that. Every property I've ever worked with has an advantage, has a competitive advantage, a unique thing about it. And my job is to find that unique advantage on your lot that nobody else has. And once we find that and we get the flow going, it unlocks like the first unlock. And once you unlock it, all of a sudden it opens up possibilities that nobody's ever thought about, because now I can park 850 more spots. What can I do with that space? I've never even thought about using it for something else, right? And then what that enables you to do is get further and further ahead on your flow. And so that's where the sites I'm working with is it leads all the way to the sale, right? Because we're processing faster, you have the ability to get more cars into the sale, sell more cars, and on the same piece of property, produce at 3 times the processing speed. So like a typical principle is batch processing for single piece flow. And if you operate with single piece flow, you're going to process 3 times the speed of anybody else. And then that's where like the silos come in. You've got all these different groups and they're operating in batch, and I hand it off to this batch, I hand it off to this batch, right? And they're moving kind of slow. My job is break down the silos. And when I process one car, move it to the next step, work in assembly line processing, and then utilize the tools where we don't need sophisticated data tools or whatever, that we can just look at, count cars, use basic math, and get updates to the leadership to know on a 2-hour basis exactly how the auction's operating. And it's like next level. Put it in place at several locations, and I mean, they're the impact, and it's pretty immediate.
So what did we learn today? That operational excellence isn't just about layout or labor. It's about people, preparation, and processes working in sync. And when you get that right, growth becomes inevitable. Thanks to Kirk Zauderer and Ty Thompson for dropping the kind of wisdom you don't find in any manual. If you're running an auction or thinking about how to make yours more efficient, more respected, and more profitable, this is your roadmap. If today's episode hit home, send it to a colleague, subscribe on YouTube or Spotify, and follow me on LinkedIn for more leadership insights in the world of automotive remarketing. I'm Rich Levene, and this has been Meet Me at the Gate. See you next time. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Meet Me at the Gate. I hope the conversation has helped to fuel your drive and equip you with insights to steer your team towards success. Remember, the road to success is always under construction. And until next time, keep your engines revving and your gas tanks full.